Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. I like to discuss history, and I'm taking us all the way back to our founding, our pre-revolutionary era, and subsequent, and immediately during the early times after the revolution. And so I'm going to talk about the first accomplished people. Today I'm talking about Susanna Haswell um, Rowson, who's considered um, the first best-selling novelist in America. So that was prior to she predated Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. By over 50 years, she predated Harriet. Uh, you know, Beecher Stowe by over 50 years. So she published Charlotte Temple, which is also called Charlotte, A Tale of Truth, right? Or a True Tale or something like that. Forgive me. But Charlotte Temple, right, is the name of the novel as well. It was originally published in 1791 in England. Uh, Susanna Rowson, her maiden name was Haswell, Susanna Haswell, and she was born in England. She was actually born in England. And at some point, she published it when she was a governess, in her early 20s, in her 20s anyway. And when she moved to the United States, she 1791, yeah, not early 20s, but late 20s. When she moved to the United States, it was republished as Charlotte Temple. Um, so I'm going to do another video discussing that novel. I'm reading it right now. It's kind of interesting. But Susanna Haswell Rowson, she was a very versatile woman, and I was very intrigued by her because I like versatility. Like I like people who could do more than one thing. It says a lot about one's energy, one's resourcefulness. They're very diligent, because to be accomplished in one thing takes a lot of energy, a lot of focus, and then to be accomplished in multiple things, right? It says a lot. It says that that person is tremendously, is very hardworking, very resourceful, very brave, very courageous, right? So she simultaneously would dominate not just literature, being the first best-selling novelist in America, right? So she dominated not just literature, but she also dominated theater and then later on education simultaneously. Now she also became the first female geographer, right? So she published the first book on human textbook on human geography. Is it called? I think it's called Wilson's Abridged Universal Geography, right? Abridgment of Wilson's Abridgment of Universal Geography or something like that. I think what she published it around, was it um 1805 or something. So, and then she also established the first female academy in Boston, right? Um, remember that in those early years, women were not really educated, right? They were just taught in social etiquette, graces, taught maybe a language, French. That's if they even came from wealthy upper class families, right? Um, but she would go on to establish a female academy, and what was it called? I think it was called Mrs. Rowson's Academy for Young Ladies, and she would train women in education, in geography. So she was very, very resourceful. And she was forced to be resourceful because she and her family, they had a lot of tragic circumstances, right? In fact, her mother died just a few days after her birth, right? So her mother died due to complications in childbirth while giving birth to Susanna Rowson herself. She was Susanna Haswell at the time. She was born to her father was a lieutenant, was a British Royal Navy lieutenant. And they after he was decommissioned, she was born in England. He was posted to a job in Boston, right, in as a customs officer. But at the time of the revolution, her father was arrested. Her father was imprisoned, but there was a prisoner exchange, and they were released and allowed to resettle in England. So her father became impoverished because the America seized his property. Right, they seized his property in America. So the revolutionary, forces in America, our founding fathers seized his property, the property of her father, and he relocated to England. He became severely ill. That was one of the reasons why he was released in a prisoner exchange. Uh, and she became a governess, right? She died shortly after. She became a governess, so she had to start, earning a living as a governess. It was one of the ways that young British women made money, right? Earned a living. So she was a governess to some duchess, right, in England, and that was when she published her first novel. Shortly after married a guy called William Rowson. That was, Rowson became and she took on Rowson as her last name. Again, her maiden name was Haswell. Um, Her husband had been a hardware merchant. His hardware merchant business failed, and so they experienced a series of bankruptcies. So it was a reason why she had to keep reinventing herself, and so they were very resourceful. When her husband's hardware business failed, he was merchant, a hardware merchant. When he failed, when she they became actors, right? So they set up a theatre, they joined a theatrical company in England. She joined the Theatre Royal in Edinburgh. So she became an actress and a playwright. And so she eventually they got a job, and then around 1793 they relocated to they immigrated to America, and then she got a job with the Philadelphia Theater Company, and she also worked in Baltimore, acting. So Um, they became full time actors, and she managed to do perform roles in 57, uh, you know, 57, she managed to perform on stage in 57 plays, which was a lot, right? She performed 57 roles on stage, and that was a lot. During that time, she also continued to write. So she was a prolific writer. She was a playwright. She actually published one of the first musical farces on the Whiskey Rebellion. Remember the Whiskey Rebellion, which was the only time in which a sitting president would lead the army directly. So George Washington had been president during the Whiskey Rebellion in Western Pennsylvania, and he'd led a militia of 13,000 men to put down the Whiskey Rebellion, right? I've done a video discussing the Whiskey Rebellion. So she wrote a musical farce on that called The Volunteers. So she was very resourceful. She continued to write. She eventually moved to Boston and set up a theater company in Boston. Unfortunately, her theater company would go bankrupt. Once it became bankrupt, she stopped acting. But she continued to write plays. She continued to write novels, but instead she would now establish an academy, a academy. She now moved into education. So that's why she became prominent in the field of educating women, right? So she saw a need there. So she was very enterprising, very resourceful, and she started to train young women. During that time, of course, she actually published a dictionary. She completed a dictionary. She continued to write novels. She, wrote the first human geography book in the U.S. So she continued. She became the first female geographer, and she continued to train a lot of women. She never had children on her own, so she was able to support herself fully. Now, unfortunately, her husband, because of all the bankruptcies, when the theater company failed, because her husband became, actors, right? They were in the acting business, but when their theater company failed, she started teaching. She started an academy in which she started teaching women, training women. But her husband got a job as a clerk in a merchant store in Boston. That merchant store would fail. It would go bankrupt, right? And her husband had stood shorty for his boss, so he was imprisoned for debt. So he was put in debtor's jail. So her husband was imprisoned because of debt and because of another bankruptcy. However, after he was, released, he would get a job, a stable job. It was at the end to his acting career, but he would get a stable job at the uh, customs office in, a Boston customs office, where he would work for 40 years. So just to be stable, right? But Susanna Rosen herself, she continued to write. He would have illegitimate kids, and she would take care of his kids. She never had children of her own, and her brother got lost at sea, and so she would take in her brother's kids, and one of them, Rebecca Haswell, whom she adopted and took care of, became the great grandmother of a famous uh, American poet, E. Cummings. And it's interesting that Susanna Rosen herself was a poet, an accomplished poet and writer. She continued to write and publish plays, and she was she was a gifted, very accomplished woman. So she became, I guess, America's first versatile woman, first Renaissance woman, right? As an educator, as a playwright, as an actress, and as a novelist. Anyway, so very accomplished woman. My name is Olorotimi Osha, and I will stop this discussion here, and I will subsequently discuss um, her her best-selling novel, America's first best-selling novel, Charlotte Temple. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.